Stop, don't eat that. The raw, desperate scream shattered the elegant calm of the sun-drenched patio. Billionaire Arthur Sterling froze his silver soup spoon suspended inches from his lips, his eyes wide with stunned disbelief. Beside him, his glamorous wife, Isabella, spun around, her beautiful face instantly contorting into a mask of sheer fury. "You filthy little urchin," she spat, her voice venomous, directed at the ragged, undersized boy who stood, pointing, breathless and trembling. What horror had this child witnessed to make him risk such an outburst? And why did the billionaire's wife seem so terrifyingly desperate to silence his warning? The answers to these questions will unravel a web of deceit and an astonishing act of courage. To witness every shocking twist as this incredible story unfolds, make sure you're with us for the journey and share your first thoughts in the comments below. What secret do you think is about to explode? The Los Angeles sun, usually a benevolent warmth on Leo Walker's face, felt more like a spotlight today, exposing the worn patches on his jeans and the dirt smudged on his cheek. 13 years old, Leo navigated the city's unforgiving streets with a quiet, observant wisdom that life in its harshness had gifted him early. His stomach, a familiar hollow drum, rumbled a rhythm against the backdrop of distant traffic. He perched on a low brick wall, bordering the manicured elegance of the Gilded Spoon, an eatery whose patrons likely spent more on a single appetizer than Leo saw in a month. He watched them, these people from another universe, lingering over vibrant salads and jewel-toned drinks. They talk for an hour before even touching the food. He mused, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. If it were me, that breadbasket would be history in 60 seconds flat. His mother's face, soft and kind, flickered in his memory, her voice a gentle echo. "Always do what's right, Leo," she'd say, her hand on his small shoulder, even when it's the hardest thing. Especially then, the memory was a warm ache, a compass in his often confusing world. Inside the patio's dappled shade, Arthur Sterling, a man whose 74 years were etched not as weariness, but as a testament to a life of formidable achievement, sat opposite his wife. His silver hair was neatly combed, his tailored blazer exuding an understated power that didn't need to announce itself. He was a pillar of the city, a name synonymous with both vast wealth and quiet philanthropy. Yet a subtle shadow sometimes played in his keen blue eyes, a hint of loneliness that even the vibrant presence of Isabella, his wife of 5 years, couldn't entirely dispel. Isabella Sterling was a vision. Decades younger than Arthur, her beauty was flawless, her cream dress a perfect match to the luxurious table linen. She laughed a bright, melodious sound as she recounted an anecdote, one hand adorned with a discreetly enormous diamond, gesturing gracefully. But as Arthur turned to acknowledge a passing acquaintance, her smile momentarily faltered. Her eyes, a startling shade of emerald, flickered towards him with an almost imperceptible coolness, a brief tightening around her perfect lips before the charming mask slipped back into place. Arthur, catching the tail end of her glance as he turned back, felt a familiar tiny pinprick of unease. He'd learned to ignore a fleeting question about the currents that ran beneath her polished surface. He dismissed it as he always did. Leo's attention, however, had snagged on something else. He'd been idly watching Isabella, her movements fluid and captivating when he saw it. Arthur was momentarily distracted, his gaze following a fluttering butterfly that had dared to enter their opulent sanctuary. In that sliver of a second, Isabella's perfectly manicured hand dipped into her expensive leather handbag. Her fingers, swift and sure, bypassed a Chanel lipstick and a gold card case, emerging with a tiny clear glass vial. No label, no markings. With a flick of her wrist almost too quick to see, she unscrewed the cap. her head tilted slightly, a curtain of dark, glossy hair obscuring her expression from most angles, but not from Leo's keen, street-sharpened eyes. He watched a cold dread coiling in his gut as she delicately tipped the vial over Arthur's steaming bowl of carrot bisque. A few drops, almost invisible, fell into the vibrant orange liquid. She then stirred the soup slowly, gracefully with her silver spoon, her expression once again serene, solicitous. She leaned forward, her voice a soft murmur. "You must eat, darling. Keep your strength up." Arthur smiled a genuine, affectionate smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, and picked up his own spoon. He dipped it into the bisque, the rich aroma wafting even to where Leo sat, making his empty stomach clench. "Even when it's the hardest thing." His mother's voice, clear as a bell. Arthur raised the spoon, laden with the creamy soup, towards his lips. Leo's breath hitched. The world seemed to slow. The chatter of the restaurant, the distant city, hum his own hunger. It all faded. There was only the spoon moving and the silent, deadly secret only he knew. He just couldn't let it happen. Before thought could yield to fear, before the crushing weight of his own insignificance could pin him down, Leo Walker was on his feet. He scrambled over the low wall, heedless of the scrape to his knee, his mismatched sneakers pounding on the pristine patio tiles. He didn't just shout. The sound that ripped from his young throat was raw, desperate, a piercing shriek that shattered the genteel afternoon calm like a thrown stone through a stained glass window. "Stop, don't eat that!" Arthur Sterling froze, spoon suspended inches from his mouth. Head snapped around, forks clattered. A collective gasp rippled through the gilded spoon. Isabella's head whipped towards Leo, her emerald eyes blazing not with surprise, but with a sudden venomous fury. "What in God's name do you think you're doing, you filthy little urchin?" She hissed, her voice, a stark contrast to her earlier melodious tones. The air crackled. Disaster, it seemed, had been invited to lunch, and Leo Walker, a boy who owned nothing but the tattered clothes on his back, and the unwavering echo of his mother's integrity, stood at its epicenter. The patio of the Gilded Spoon, moments before a haven of leisurely indulgence, was now a tableau of frozen shock and rising murmurs. Leo Walker stood his ground, small and defiant, amidst the opulence, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Isabella Sterling, her face a mask of outraged fury, advanced on him. "How dare you?" She spat, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Security. Someone remove this vagrant immediately. He's clearly delusional, probably after money." A flustered maitre d' rushed forward, wringing his hands. "Madam Sterling, please." "Sir, perhaps the young man is mistaken." He glanced nervously at Leo. "Perhaps it was a sugar packet you saw, son. A bit of spilled salt." Leo unflinching despite the man's towering presence and Isabella's venomous glare, shook his head, his gaze direct and unwavering fixed on the maitre d'. "It wasn't a sugar packet," he stated, his voice surprisingly steady. "It was a little bottle. Clear." She poured something in his soup. He pointed, a determined, albeit grimy, finger, towards Isabella, then towards Arthur's still untouched bisque. Arthur Sterling had remained motionless, the spoon still halfway to his lips. His initial shock was now overlaid with a chilling stillness, his mind racing. Isabella's reaction. It was too shrill, too quick to accuse, too focused on discrediting the boy, rather than expressing concern for him. He knew his wife's temper, her occasional penchant for drama, but this felt different. This felt desperate. He slowly lowered the spoon, the clink against the porcelain plate, echoing unnaturally loud in the sudden hush that had fallen over the nearby tables. Isabella Arthur said, his voice low and calm, yet carrying an undeniable weight that made her flinch. "What is this boy talking about? Arthur, darling, you can't possibly be entertaining this nonsense," Isabella exclaimed, attempting a dismissive laugh that sounded brittle to his ears. She turned her charm, or what she hoped was charm, towards a stern-looking police officer who had just arrived, drawn by the maitre d's hushed, urgent call. This was Officer Rodriguez, a woman whose no-nonsense demeanor was a familiar sight in this part of the city. Officer Isabella began, her voice dripping with faux concern. "This poor child is clearly disturbed. He's accosting us, making wild accusations. He probably just wants a handout. I'm sure a good meal and a talking to is all he needs." Officer Rodriguez, however, wasn't looking at Isabella's perfectly sculpted face or her expensive dress. Her experienced eyes were on Leo, then on Arthur, then on the soup. The boy's ragged appearance was a stark contrast to the setting, yet there was a compelling sincerity in his young, determined face. And Mr. Sterling. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost. "I don't want money," Leo said, his voice rising, slightly cutting through Isabella's syrupy tones. "I saw what I saw." In her purse, a small, clear bottle. She put it in the soup when he looked away. He met Arthur's gaze directly. "You can check her bag. Or just smell the soup." "Please, sir." Arthur's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something unreadable. Pain, suspicion, a dawning horror, passing through them. He looked at his wife, truly looked at her. Her smile was fixed, a beautiful, terrifying rictus. Her eyes, however, darted nervously, avoiding his. The tiny pinprick of unease he'd so often dismissed now felt like a shard of ice in his gut. Officer Rodriguez Arthur said, his voice raspy but firm. "Perhaps we should verify the boy's claim. For everyone's peace of mind, of course." "Verify!" Isabella shrieked, her composure finally shattering. "Arthur, how could you? You'd take the word of this street rat over your own wife. This is preposterous. I won't be subjected to this indignity." She made to grab her handbag from the table. "Ma'am." Officer Rodriguez stepped forward, her voice calm but authoritative, her hand subtly motioning for Isabella to stop. "If there's nothing to hide, a quick look wouldn't hurt, would it? It would clear this all up very quickly." Isabella's hand froze mid-air. Panic, raw and unfiltered, flashed across her face before she could mask it. "There's nothing in my bag. This is harassment. I demand to speak to my lawyer. No one is accusing you of anything yet, Mrs. Sterling, officer," Rodriguez said smoothly, though her eyes had sharpened. "We're simply trying to understand the situation. The boy has made a serious allegation." She turned to another officer who had arrived. "Officer Miller, perhaps you could retrieve the soup bowl. We'll have it sent for analysis as a precaution." As Officer Miller approached the table, Isabella lunged, not for her bag, but for the soup bowl itself. "No, don't touch it. It's cold now. It's ruined." It was too late. Her desperate, almost animalistic lunge, the wildness in her eyes, the way she tried to physically shield the bowl. It was a confession, louder than any words. Several diners gasped audibly. Cell phone cameras, previously discreet, were now openly recording. Arthur Sterling felt a cold wave wash over him. The vibrant orange of the bisque suddenly looked sinister. The beautiful, charming woman he had married, the woman he had tried to convince himself he loved, was a stranger. Or worse, a predator he had willingly invited into his life. The why of the boy's warning was becoming terrifyingly clear. "Isabella," he said, and the name felt foreign on his tongue, a bitter taste. His voice was devoid of its earlier warmth, now flat hollow. "Step away from the bowl." She stared at him, her chest heaving, her emerald eyes wide, with a mixture of fury and dawning terror. For a moment, no one moved. The only sounds were the distant wail of a siren growing closer and the frantic clicking of cell phone cameras. Then Officer Rodriguez, with a decisive nod from Arthur, gently but firmly took Isabella Sterling by the arm. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to come with us to the station to answer some questions." Isabella let out a strangled sob, a sound of pure theatrical despair that failed to move anyone present. "This is a mistake, a terrible mistake, Arthur, tell them." But Arthur merely looked at Leo, who stood small and silent, his thin shoulders squared, watching the drama unfold with an unnerving adult stillness. The boy had done the hardest thing. Now it was Arthur's turn. He turned to Officer Rodriguez. "Officer," he said, his voice heavy with a truth he could no longer deny, "please test that soup, and check her handbag thoroughly." The reign of Isabella Sterling, it seemed, had just met its abrupt and very public end. The grand, echoing silence of his Bel Air mansion felt more oppressive to Arthur Sterling than any prison. Hours had passed since the chaotic scene at the Gilded Spoon, since Isabella had been escorted away, her face a twisted mask of disbelief and fury. The police had been professional, discreet even, but the damage was done. The carefully constructed facade of his later life marriage had been shattered, revealing a rotten core he now, with sickening clarity, admitted he had suspected for far too long. He wandered through the opulent rooms, each exquisitely furnished space, now feeling like a stage set for a hollow play. How had he, a man renowned for his business acumen, his shrewd judgment of character, been so utterly blind, or perhaps not blind, but willfully ignorant? He sank into a plush armchair in his vast library, the scent of old leather and expensive polish suddenly cloying. Loneliness, he conceded with a weary sigh, had been a persuasive, insidious companion in his advancing years. Isabella, with her youth and vibrant beauty, had seemed like a shield against it, a final dazzling acquisition. He remembered a trip to Italy, her laughter echoing in a sun-drenched piazza, yet even then a fleeting calculation in her eyes, as she'd admired a particularly exorbitant necklace. He'd bought it for her, of course. He'd bought it all. The image of Leo Walker, small, underfed, yet radiating an unshakable integrity, superimposed itself over the gilded memories. That boy who had nothing had offered him everything, the truth. A profound sense of responsibility, mixed with a gratitude that felt almost painful, settled over Arthur. This wasn't just about a crime averted. It was about a life, perhaps his own, given a stark, uncomfortable yet vital chance to pivot. Meanwhile, Leo found himself in the unexpectedly calm environment of a police precinct interview room. He was exhausted, the adrenaline having long since leached away, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness and a gnawing hunger. Officer Rodriguez, however, had been surprisingly gentle. She'd gotten him a sandwich, a real one with thick bread and actual ham, and a carton of milk which he'd devoured with an intensity that made her smile faintly. She listened patiently as he recounted for the third time what he had seen, her questions, precise but not accusatory. "You did a brave thing today, Leo," she said finally, her dark eyes holding a hint of warmth. "A very brave thing." Leo just shrugged, a familiar street kid gesture of deflecting anything that felt too much like praise or pity. He was used to being invisible, or worse, a nuisance. This quiet respect felt foreign. It was then that Arthur Sterling arrived. He looked older than he had at the restaurant, the lines on his face etched deeper by the day's turmoil. He dismissed the officers with a quiet word and sat opposite Leo, the polished table reflecting their disparate images. Leo Arthur began, his voice softer now, tinged with a gravity that Leo instinctively recognized as genuine. "I don't have the words to adequately express my gratitude. You You saved my life." Leo fidgeted with a loose thread on his worn t-shirt. "I was hungry." He mumbled, his gaze fixed on the tabletop. Then, looking up with a flash of his earlier directness, he added, "And she was weird. Real weird." A ghost of a smile touched Arthur's lips, the first genuine one in what felt like an eternity. The boy's blunt honesty was a cleaner sting than Isabella's polished deceptions. "Yes," Arthur agreed, "she was." He paused. "I understand you have no family, Leo. No place to go right now." Leo's wariness returned. He'd learned the hard way that adult interest often came with strings, usually unpleasant ones. "I manage," he said, a touch of his street-bred defiance in his tone. Arthur nodded slowly. He wouldn't push. "Not yet. I know a man," he said instead. "A good man. His name is David Harrison. He runs a youth center, a place called Second Start. It's a safe place, with good food, and people who care." Leo's eyes, large and usually so quick to assess, flickered with a mixture of suspicion and a longing so profound it made Arthur's chest ache. A safe place. Good food. People who cared. It sounded like a fairy tale. The journey to Second Start was quiet. Arthur drove his expensive sedan gliding silently through the city streets. Leo stared out the window, watching his familiar, harsh world recede. David Harrison met them at the door of a cheerful, well-kept building, a sturdy, kind-faced man in his 50s, with an easy smile that seemed to radiate warmth. Arthur, in his tailored suit, looked a little formal, a little out of his element, amidst the colourful artwork and the distant sounds of youthful chatter. But David greeted him like an old friend. "Arthur, good to see you, though. I wish it were under better circumstances," David said, his handshake firm. He then turned his smile on Leo. "And you must be Leo. Welcome to Second Start. Heard you had quite a day." Leo just nodded, overwhelmed. The place smelled of floor wax and... Was that cookies? He spotted a large orange juice dispenser in a brightly lit dining area. His eyes widened almost comically. David, noticing his gaze, chuckled. "Help yourself to some orange juice, Leo. And anything else you see. We're about to have dinner." He winked. "All of it if you can manage, though. Maybe not all at once." Later, after Leo had eaten more than he thought possible, real chicken mashed potatoes, green beans, Arthur found him sitting alone in a quiet common room, looking small against a large, slightly worn sofa. Arthur sat down, not too close, and for a moment they were both silent. Then Arthur reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, heavy bronze coin. It was worn smooth in places, an image of an anchor barely visible. "This is a Navy Challenge coin," Arthur said, his voice quiet. "It was given to me a long, long time ago for an act of courage I wasn't sure I possessed. It's a reminder that even in the darkest times, one person can make a difference. That integrity matters." He held it out to Leo. "I want you to have it." Leo stared at the coin in Arthur's outstretched palm. It looked old, important. He hesitated, then slowly reached out and took it. The metal was cool, solid in his hand. He didn't know what to say. "Just keep it safe," Arthur said gently. "Let it remind you of today, of what you did." He stood up. "David will take good care of you here, Leo. I'll be in touch." Leo nodded, still looking at the coin. As Arthur turned to leave, guided by David, Leo felt a strange new feeling unfurl within him. Not quite hope, not yet, but something less heavy than the constant dread he usually carried. It was the tentative, fragile stirring of a seed planted in the most unlikely of soils. The days at Second Start began to string together for Leo Walker, each one a small tentative step away from the harsh certainties of the street. It wasn't easy. Trusting that a meal would appear 3 times a day without a fight or a scavenge took effort. Sleeping in a bed in a room with other boys whose snores and nighttime murmurs were initially alien felt strangely exposed after years of a solitary, vigilant existence. Nightmares still came, shadowy replays of cold nights and gnawing hunger. But now a quiet word from David Harrison, whose presence always seemed to be there when needed, or the muted sounds of the center around him, would gently pull him back to the surprising reality of safety. David, with his endless patience and quiet understanding, encouraged Leo to join the center's informal classes. Math was a jumble of confusing symbols, but history with its stories of struggles and survival resonated. During one particularly baffling lesson on fractions, Leo, tasked with dividing a hypothetical pizza among an unlikely number of guests, had muttered, "On the street, you just grab the biggest piece you can and run. No fractions needed." David, overhearing, had chuckled a warm, rumbling sound. A valid survival strategy, Leo, he'd said, a twinkle in his eye. But here we aim for slightly more equitable distribution and less running. Arthur Sterling became a regular visitor. He'd arrive in his quiet, expensive car, sometimes bringing a book he thought Leo might like, or a bag of surprisingly good cookies from a downtown bakery. During these visits, he began to share pieces of his own past, not just the polished narratives of success, but the grittier, forgotten chapters. One afternoon he brought a faded black-and-white photograph of a skinny, barefoot boy standing proudly beside a lopsided handmade go-kart in a dusty, impoverished-looking yard. "That's me," Arthur said, a faint, wistful smile playing on his lips. "Wisconsin, 1958. We didn't have much. That go-kart, my friends and I built it from scrap wood and discarded pram wheels. It fell apart spectacularly on its maiden voyage downhill right into Mrs. Henderson's prize-winning petunias." He let out a soft laugh. "She was a formidable woman, Mrs. Henderson. Chased us halfway down the block with a broom. I think that was the fastest I ever ran, even faster than when well, let's just say, I wasn't always a model citizen." The shared laughter, tentative at first, then more open, built another small bridge between them. Leo began to see not just the billionaire, but the boy Arthur had once been. In the background of their slowly forming bond, the wheels of justice turned. Arthur's lawyers kept him updated. Isabella Sterling had been formally charged with attempted murder, among other offences. Bail had been unequivocally denied. The newspapers, initially frenzied, had moved on to newer scandals, but the knowledge that Isabella was facing the severe consequences of her actions brought Arthur a grim, quiet satisfaction, though no real joy. His focus was increasingly on the future, particularly Leo's. He poured his considerable energy and resources into establishing the Leo Walker Trust. He found himself in long meetings with lawyers and financial advisors, discussing endowments and mission statements. "It's not about charity, you see," he explained to his rather perplexed lead attorney, a man more accustomed to hostile takeovers than philanthropic endeavors. "It's about potential. It's about recognizing that true wealth isn't just what you accumulate, but what you cultivate. In others, in the future." One sunny Saturday, Arthur took Leo back to Second Start's small, well-tended garden. In a quiet corner under the shade of a young jacaranda tree stood a new wooden bench. It was simple, sturdy, and inviting. Fixed to its backrest was a small, gleaming bronze plaque. Leo leaned closer to read the engraved words, "In honor of Leo Walker. For choosing truth over silence." Leo stared at it, his throat suddenly tight. He traced the letters with a finger that trembled slightly. No one had ever honored him for anything. Arthur placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. The world needs to be reminded. Leo, he said softly, that voices like yours matter. That courage often comes in the most unexpected forms. They sat on the bench for a long while, the silence comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. It was later that week in David Harrison's cozy, cluttered office that Arthur broached the subject that had been forming in his mind and heart. David sat with them, a supportive presence. Leo Arthur began, his gaze direct and earnest. You know I've grown very fond of you, and I believe you deserve every chance at a good, stable life. A life with a family. He paused, taking a deep breath. I've spoken with my lawyers and with David. I would like to become your legal guardian, Leo, to provide for you, to guide you, if you would consider it. Leo's eyes widened. He looked from Arthur's serious, hopeful face to David's encouraging smile. The room suddenly felt very small, the air thick with unspoken emotions. He swallowed hard. Guardian, he managed his voice, barely a whisper. Then a flicker of his old practical self surfaced, a touch of bewildered humor in his tone. Does that mean I have to call you Dad or something? 'Cause that's a lot. Arthur's features softened into a warm smile, and David let out a gentle laugh. You can call me Arthur, Leo, Arthur said, always. Though what you call me isn't important. What matters is that you feel safe, supported, that you know you have someone who will always be there for you. Leo looked down at the worn navy coin Arthur had given him, which he now kept carefully tucked in his pocket. He turned it over and over in his fingers. He remembered his mother's voice, the warmth of her hand. He thought of the cold nights, the hunger, the fear, and then he looked at Arthur, truly looked at him, at the kindness in his eyes, the genuine offer of a future he'd never dared to imagine. The street kid defenses built up over years of hardship finally crumbled. A single tear traced a path down his dusty cheek, followed by another. He nodded, a small, jerky movement at first, then more firmly. Yes, he whispered the word, thick with emotion. Yes, Arthur. I would like that. The smile that lit up Arthur Sterling's face was brighter than any sun Leo had ever seen. In that small office, amidst the scent of old books and new beginnings, a new kind of family forged in the crucible of an unlikely crisis began to take root. The following years unfolded for Leo Walker, or Leo Sterling, as he shyly began to call himself after Arthur formally, joyfully became his legal father. Like the pages of a book, he never dreamed he'd be allowed to read, let alone star in. The grand Bel Air mansion, initially so intimidating, slowly transformed into a home filled not with echoing silence, but with the sounds of Leo practicing the piano badly at first, then surprisingly well, and Arthur's occasional rumbling laughter. School was a mountain range of challenges. Catching up on years of missed education, navigating the complex social codes of teenagers who'd never known a day of real hardship. Yet with Arthur's unwavering support, David Harrison's continued mentorship, and a core of steel resilience forged on the streets Leo climbed, there were of course moments of levity. Leo, now a lanky 16-year-old, once spent an entire Sunday afternoon patiently trying to explain a viral internet meme to Arthur, involving a confused cat and a salad. Arthur, bless his philanthropic heart, listened with intense concentration, nodding sagely. The following week, at a rather stuffy charity board meeting, Arthur, attempting to lighten the mood during a discussion on budget deficits, gravely announced, "Perhaps we are like the cat and the budget. Is the salad we do not comprehend." The resulting baffled silence was broken only by his discreet assistant's stifled cough. Leo, when told later, had howled with laughter, a sound that Arthur cherished more than any stock market gain. A year after the incident at the Gilded Spoon, Arthur Sterling stood before a room mushin of journalists and community leaders. He wasn't there to discuss his latest real estate venture or a new philanthropic wing at the City Museum. He was there to launch the Leo Walker Trust. We often look for heroes in grand capes, and on lofty stages Arthur began his voice, clear and resonant, but sometimes true courage. True integrity resides in the heart of a child. Ngudo has every reason to believe the world has forgotten him. He spoke of Leo not as a victim, but as a catalyst, a boy whose unwavering commitment to truth had saved a life, and in doing so had illuminated a path forward. The trust, he explained, would be dedicated to providing shelter, education, and opportunity to other young people living on the precipices of society, other Leo Walkers who deserved a chance to have their voices heard, their potential realized. He didn't mention Isabella by name. Her story was now a grim footnote in court records, a long prison sentence, her only remaining legacy. 10 years later, the modest community centre buzzed with a cheerful energy. Leo Sterling, now a confident, articulate young man of 23, a recent law school graduate specializing in juvenile advocacy, leaned against a brightly painted wall, a gentle smile on his face. He was here today as a volunteer, a mentor. He watched a group of teenagers, a mix of bravado and vulnerability, attempt to organize a charity car wash. One particularly cynical-looking boy, no older than 14, with eyes that held a familiar, old-before-his-time weariness, grumbled about the pointlessness of it all. "No one cares anyway," the boy muttered, kicking at a loose stone. "Rich folks just drive by in their fancy cars." Leo walked over, crouching down to the boy's level. "I used to think that too," he said quietly. The boy looked up, surprised. Sometimes Leo continued, a hint of knowing humor in his voice. "The people in fancy cars have no idea what to do with a sponge, but they might surprise you with what's in their hearts, especially if you give them a chance to see yours." He offered the boy a friendly wink. "Besides, who doesn't like a car that gleams? It's practically a public service." The boy blinked, then a reluctant grin tugged at his lips. Later that week, Leo drove up the familiar winding driveway to Arthur's estate. Arthur Sterling, now in his mid-80s, greeted him from a comfortable chair on the sun-drenched patio, the very same patio where their lives had first so dramatically intersected. He was frailer, his movements slower, but his blue eyes were as keen and kind as ever. A warm blanket lay across his knees. They talked for hours about Leo's work, about the world, about old memories. The ease between them was deep, unspoken, a testament to years of shared trust and affection. "You know," Arthur said, his voice a little thinner now, but still firm, "I was trying to explain that internet meme to my nurse the other day. The one with the cat. I think I almost got it this time." Leo laughed, a warm, genuine sound that echoed across the manicured lawns. "Some mysteries are best left unsolved, Arthur. It keeps life interesting." Arthur smiled, a deep contentment settling in his features. He reached into the pocket of his cardigan and pulled out something small and bronze. It was another Navy Challenge coin, almost identical to the one he had given Leo all those years ago. Perhaps even its twin. "Your mother taught you about courage," Arthur said softly, pressing the coin into Leo's hand. "And you, Leo, you taught an old man about hope, about the enduring power of a good heart. This isn't just for what you did then. It's for the man you've become, for the good you will continue to put into this world." Leo closed his fingers around the coin, its familiar weight a comforting anchor. He looked at Arthur, his eyes shining with an emotion too profound for words. Gratitude, love, the deep, unshakable knowledge of having found his place, his purpose. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the Los Angeles sky in hues of orange and violet, Leo Sterling knew that his story, once a whisper in the shadows, was now a clear, strong voice. It was a story of earned peace, of a legacy not of wealth but of unwavering hope, a testament to the extraordinary truth that sometimes the most profound changes begin with a single desperate scream and the courage to listen. And this time, the future stretched before him, bright and full of promise, a path he would walk with integrity forever, carrying the light that Arthur Sterling had helped him find. How often does a single moment of bravery, a choice to speak truth in the face of fear, truly alter the course of not just one life, but many Leo Walker's journey from a shadowed alley to a future illuminated by purpose and love, reminds us that the brightest lights can indeed emerge from the most unexpected sparks. Perhaps we've all encountered, or hope to encounter, those pivotal moments where a hand reaches out not with judgment, but with understanding, or where an act of courage, whether our own or someone else's, profoundly shifts our world. It's these connections, these choices, that truly weave the richest tapestries of our lives. The story of Leo and Arthur leaves a profound echo in our hearts, a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit and the beautiful possibility of second chances. We find ourselves wondering, did their journey resonate with you as deeply as it did with us? What particular moment in Leo's transformation, or perhaps in Arthur's quiet acts of selfless fatherhood, moved you the most? We would be genuinely honored to hear your reflections in the comments below. And as we continue on our own journey of sharing these narratives, your insights and perspectives are truly invaluable. If there's anything in today's story, a character arc, a plot point, or even the way it was told, that you feel could be enhanced, or if you have an idea that might spark our next tale, please don't hesitate to share your constructive thoughts. Your feedback is not just appreciated, it's a vital part of how we grow and strive to bring you more stories that touch the heart. If Leo and Arthur's story brought a little warmth or inspiration to your day, a simple like would mean the world to us. And if you believe their message of hope and courage might resonate with someone you know, please feel free to share it with them. To ensure you don't miss out on future emotional journeys and explorations of the human spirit, we warmly invite you to subscribe and ring that notification bell. There are so many more meaningful stories waiting to be discovered, and we'd love to explore them together with you. Thank you for sharing your time with us today. Until we meet again in our next story, may your own life be filled with moments of unexpected grace and courageous kindness.